Why did everyone fall silent when she stepped out of the Humvee? The air at 29 Palms was a living thing, dust, heat, and diesel fused into something that burned the lungs. Gunnery Sergeant Anna Sharma adjusted her grip on the worn canvas rifle case in her hand. Its edges were frayed, its olive drab faded to the color of old moss. Around her, the desert shimmered like molten glass. The sun pressed down on everything with the weight of judgment. A group of Marines watched her approach. Scout snipers, 1st Battalion, 7th Marines. Lean, sharp-eyed men with shoulders like steel cables and laughter like knives. Their gear gleamed: carbon fiber rifle stocks, advanced optics, ballistic computers clipped to their vests. Everything about them screamed precision and pride. But when they saw her case, their pride turned into amusement. "Check out the antique roadshow," someone muttered. "Bet she's got a musket in there." Laughter cracked through the heat. Sharma didn't respond. Her expression didn't change. The desert wind caught the edge of her sleeve, tugging lightly as if testing her composure. She just kept walking, steady, unhurried. Years of discipline had burned the impulse to react out of her. Stillness was her armor now. Their platoon sergeant stepped forward, his voice a polished rock. "Gunny, welcome to the stumps." She nodded once. "Staff Sergeant." The exchange was clipped, formal, an economy of words learned over decades. Behind the sergeant, a captain emerged from the command post, sunlight glinting off her tablet screen. Captain Eva Rostova moved like a blade drawn from a scabbard, sharp, efficient, and cold. "Gunnery Sergeant Sharma," she said. "Ma'am," Anna replied. Rostova's eyes flicked from Anna's face to the old rifle case, and a faint crease appeared between her brows. "HQ says you're here as an adjunct evaluator for my platoon's pre-deployment workup. That's unusual." Unusual, a polite word for unwanted. "Orders are orders, ma'am," Sharma said evenly. Behind Rostova, Sergeant Connelly, call sign Carnage, leaned against the gear cage, arms folded. He was the platoon's star shooter, and he knew it. The kind of Marine who smiled like he was doing you a favor. He tilted his head toward the case. "So what's in there, Gunny? Something you borrowed from your granddad?" More laughter. For a moment, Anna's eyes met his. No anger, no defensiveness, just quiet depth, the kind of silence that made men uncomfortable because they couldn't read it. Rostova's voice snapped the air. "Sergeant Connelly, secure your gear. Platoon, assemble in 5. The laughter died. The chain of command reasserted itself. "Gunnery Sergeant with me." Inside the command post, the air conditioning hit like ice water. Maps covered the walls, red and blue acetate overlays tracing mock operations. The room smelled of coffee and ozone. "Let be clear," Rostova said, setting the tablet down with a sharp tap. "I run a top-tier platoon. My shooters are the best. They've broken every record from here to Quantico. Sergeant Connelly holds the schoolhouse record for the 1,000-yard cold bore. They trust me and I trust them. I don't know why you're here, but you won't interfere with my schedule. You observe, take notes, and stay out of the way. Understood?" "Perfectly, ma'am." Anna placed the case gently on the floor beside her. That gesture alone, quiet, careful, seemed to irritate the captain. "And that thing," Rostova said, nodding toward it. "Whatever relic in there, keep it stowed. You'll be issued a standard M4 for the duration." "With all due respect, ma'am," Sharma replied, "this is my rifle, it's what I use." Rostova's jaw tightened. "It's a liability. My men need consistency. They don't need nostalgia." Before Anna could answer, Connelly appeared in the doorway. "Ma'am, platoon's formed." His eyes flicked down to the case again, the smirk returning. "Dismissed, Gunny," Rostova said. Anna picked up the rifle case and stepped back into the punishing heat. The snipers were waiting outside, their modern rifles glinting in the sun like something out of a catalog. She walked past them without a glance. Stillness again, no need to prove anything. But she felt their judgment, that invisible current of mockery. She felt it 100 times before in her career. It always sounded the same, always smelled like oil and arrogance. The next morning the range at 29 Palms was already alive by 700. The desert was a furnace. Heat shimmered off the earth in waves. Targets, steel silhouettes, waited at 300, 600, 1,000 yards. The snipers lay prone, their bipods dug into the ground, their kestrels reading the wind, their spotters murmuring corrections. "Send it." Crack. A second later, ping. The rhythm of pride. Connelly was the loudest, firing, rolling onto his side with a grin. "Too easy. This rifle's a laser beam." Captain Ristova watched from behind the line, arms crossed, satisfied. Sharma stood back near the ammo truck, arms folded. She hadn't brought her rifle out, she just watched. Watched the bullets trace their invisible paths through heat and wind. Watched the ground swallow their noise. She wasn't studying them. She was reading the range. Ristova approached, impressed Gunny. "They're good shooters," Sharma said. "Well trained." "They're the best," Ristova corrected. Then, with that same edge, "You're scheduled for familiarization fire this afternoon. You'll use the M110 we're issuing you." "I brought my own rifle, ma'am." The captain's voice cooled further. "Fine, let's see it. Let's see the museum piece." The line went silent. Every Marine turned to watch as Anna knelt at the far end of the firing line and unbuckled the worn straps. The canvas gave a soft sigh as she opened it. Inside lay a rifle that looked out of place among the polymer and carbon fiber machines. A Marine exhaled a low whistle. The weapon was a Marine Corps M40A1, walnut stock, heavy steel barrel, dark bluing worn away at the edges. Its old unertl 10x scope gleamed faintly in the light. "Holy hell," Connelly said. "Did you pull that out of the Paris Island Museum? My dad qualified with one of those." "It's a fine rifle, Sergeant," she said softly, lifting it with both hands as though it were something alive. Connelly grinned, "Sure, for a parade." No reply. She lay prone on the mat, resting the stock against her shoulder, the rifle on a simple sand-filled sock instead of a bipod. She pulled a small, leather-bound notebook from her pocket, licked the pencil tip, and wrote a line of notes. "What's your dope for 800, Gunny?" Connelly called out. "Got that in your slide rule?" Still nothing. She made her wind calls silently, adjusting the micrometer knobs on the old unertl. Her fingers moved like she was tuning an instrument. She plucked a single blade of grass and let it fall, watching its dance in the wind. The others grinned. Ristova folded her arms tighter. Anna's breathing slowed until the desert seemed to hold its breath with her. The rifle cracked, a sharp, distinct note that cut through the deeper booms of the .300 Win mags. They waited. Then clang, dead center at 800 yards. Silence. Connelly's smirk flickered. Lucky shot. She chambered another round, fired again. Another clang. 3 more, each a heartbeat apart, each finding the same fist-sized cluster in the middle of the steel plate. Ristova raised her binoculars, her mouth a thin line. "Not possible." "Let's see you do that at a grand," Connelly challenged, trying to mask the strain in his voice. Anna said nothing, adjusted the windage, took her breath. The shot cracked across the valley, the sound hung in the air, then faint, distant ping. The farthest target, 1,000 yards dead center. Connelly stared at his kestrel. The crosswind was 12 miles per hour full value. The data said that shot should have drifted nearly 2 feet. She shouldn't have hit that plate, not with that scope, not with that rifle. But she had. When she rose, the others just watched her, the noise of the desert replaced by a strange, reverent quiet. Even Ristova didn't speak. Anna gathered her brass, slipped her notebook into her pocket, and carried her rifle back to its faded case. The zipper's slow sound cut through the silence like a signature. Behind her, the captain exhaled slowly. Connelly swallowed hard, jaw tight. None of them said it aloud, but they all felt the same unease, the sense that they had just seen something that didn't make sense, something that wasn't supposed to happen. That night, when the desert cooled and the stars burned sharp above the barracks, no one laughed in the rec room. The jokes had dried up. The story of the gunny with the ancient rifle had already spread through the base. And though no one said it, every Marine who had seen it wondered the same thing. Who the hell was she really? Why did the captain assign her to his team, the same man who mocked her? The desert at dawn was quiet, a kind of silence that hummed beneath the skin. The range was empty now, just the faint smell of burnt powder and the dull gleam of steel targets pocked with yesterday's hits. Gunnery Sergeant Anna Sharma stood alone at the edge of the firing line, her canvas case resting at her feet, watching the sun rise over the jagged hills of 29 Palms. She could feel the base coming alive behind her, the rattle of trucks, the metallic clatter of gear. A new day, a new test. Inside the command post, Captain Rostova's voice cut through the chatter. Serpent's path starts at 0600. This is the final evaluation before deployment. I want 0 mistakes. The Serpent's path. Every sniper at the base knew the name. A 3-day endurance and infiltration exercise across 50 miles of the most unforgiving desert terrain in the country. Long-range reconnaissance, target interdiction, and stealth exfiltration. The kind of scenario designed to break men who thought they couldn't be broken. Rostova glanced at the roster. Connelly, team lead. Sharma, you're embedded as observer. Connelly looked up sharply. Ma'am, with respect, observer. The captain didn't blink. You heard me. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Yes, ma'am. Anna said nothing, she only nodded. Outside, the wind began to rise, dry and restless. It carried the taste of sand and something electric, a distant promise of change. By midday, they were on the move. 4-man teams stepping off in staggered intervals, their packs heavy with rations, ammo, and water. The horizon shimmered endlessly. Connelly led the way for his team, his gait confident but tight. The silence between him and Anna was thick, the air vibrating with unspoken tension. Corporal Carter, barely 21 and still carrying the arrogance of youth, trudged behind them, muttering about the heat. You ever see anything like this before, Gunny? Carter asked. Once, Anna replied. Afghanistan, the terrain was worse, but the silence felt the same. He glanced at her rifle, still wrapped in canvas. You really think that old thing's gonna hold up out here? Her tone was soft but final. It always has. They moved through the wasteland for hours, the rhythm of boots and breath the only sound. When the sun began to fall, the hills bled red and gold. They found a high ridge overlooking a dry ravine, a perfect observation point for their first objective, a simulated weapons cache. Connelly checked his coordinates. Range, 1,200 yards. He adjusted his scope, confident hands setting up the bipod. Spotter, give me wind. Carter checked his kestrel, calling numbers in a rush of jargon. Wind 340, 8 miles per hour, full value. Send it, Connelly said. The shot cracked, a half-second later, ping, center hit. Too easy, he grinned. Anna made a note in her small leather book. She didn't smile. She didn't look impressed. She just wrote quietly, her pencil moving with calm precision. Connelly glanced at her. You taking notes for the museum, Gunny? She looked up at him, expression unreadable. For your debrief. He turned back to his rifle, hiding a smirk that faltered too quickly. By the end of day 2, they had completed 2 objectives. Long hours in the dirt, cramped hides carved into the side of rocky slopes, their skin crusted with salt and dust. Connelly's pride had found its rhythm again. He was back in control until the wind began to change. It started as a low whisper, a strange vibration that rolled across the ground. Then came the static. The radio crackled with a warning. Be advised, weather advisory, sandstorm forming northwest sector. Visibility expected to drop below 10 meters. Connelly lifted his head, squinting toward the horizon. The sky was turning the color of ash. Within an hour, the world vanished. The haboob came without mercy, a roaring wall of sand and fury that swallowed the desert whole. It hit them like a living thing, screaming, clawing, choking. The air turned solid. The sun disappeared. "Everyone down," Connelly shouted, his voice barely audible over the storm. They huddled behind a rock outcropping, goggles fogging, gear vibrating from the wind. "GPS is gone," Carter yelled, tapping at his device. "Signal's dead." Connelly grabbed it, nothing but static and a spinning icon. Their compasses jittered uselessly. The world around them was just swirling brown chaos. "Stay put," Connelly ordered, panic bleeding into command. "We'll ride it out here." No one spoke. The desert screamed. Anna watched them all quietly, her scarf pulled over her mouth. The others crouched low, blinded by their own technology, their confidence eroded grain by grain. She sat still for 10 long minutes, eyes half closed, feeling the wind's direction shift. Then she moved. She crawled through the gale toward Connelly, her presence calm in the chaos. "Sergeant," she said evenly, her voice cutting through the howl, "we need to move." He looked up, eyes stinging with grit. "We can't see a damn thing, we stay put." "They're from this base," she said. "They know the terrain. They'll search every natural shelter for a lost team, including this one." Carter blinked. "You think the OPFOR can move in this?" "I know they can," she replied. "We don't have time." Connelly hesitated. The storm screamed louder, the sand biting into his skin. "Where the hell do we go?" he finally shouted. Anna pointed into the storm. "2 clicks bearing 295. There's a dry wash ahead, it'll give us cover. Move." She didn't wait for permission. She got up and walked straight into the storm. For a heartbeat, none of them followed. Then Carter rose, squinting through the sand, and went after her. One by one, they moved, stumbling shadows in the chaos, following a woman whose instincts were their only compass. They couldn't see more than 10 feet ahead, but she seemed to move with certainty. She used her hands to feel the slope of the ground, her boots tracing the contour of the ridge line, her mind mapping the unseen. Connelly stumbled beside her, disoriented, his rifle clattering against his chest. "You can't possibly know where we are." Anna didn't look back. "I don't need to know. I just need to feel where the land falls away. The wash is close." Her calm wasn't arrogance. It was something else, an old kind of knowing, born from decades of failure and endurance. When they finally reached the wash, the wind dropped just enough for them to breathe. Connelly collapsed behind a boulder, coughing sand. "How the hell?" She just pointed ahead. "The objective's down there, about 700 yards, that's the final target." Carter lifted his fogged binoculars. "I can't see a damn thing." "No one can," Connelly said bitterly, trying to clear his scope. The glass was coated in dust, the illuminated reticle flickering and dying. "We can't shoot blind." Anna crouched low, unwrapping her rifle. The old wood gleamed darkly, smooth from years of care. The unertl scope caught the faintest light and cut through the storm just enough to see shapes. "Not blind," she murmured, "just difficult." She lay prone, resting the rifle on her pack. Her world narrowed to the small circle of glass before her. Through the swirling chaos, faint patterns emerged, dust trails bending, stones shifting. "What are you seeing?" Carter whispered. "Wind at ground level." "I can't see anything," he said. She didn't answer, her breathing slowed. The storm was no longer noise to her, it was language. Every gust spoke, every swirl meant something. She read it the way others read faces. Her hand turned the scope's micrometer knobs. 10, 15, 20 clicks left into the wind. "Gunny, that's too much hold," Connelly warned, instinct fighting disbelief. You'll miss by 10 feet. She didn't reply. Then softly, there. The wind shifted, clearing the air for half a second. Through that fleeting window, a dark shape appeared, a vehicle, antenna whipping wildly. The rifle cracked. The storm swallowed the sound, but Anna didn't flinch. Impact in 3, 2, 1. From below came a flash of yellow light. The simulator on the target vehicle triggered. Hit, Carter yelled. Holy cow. Anna was already chambering the next round. 2 dismounts near the bunker, she said calmly. They'll move to cover. Watch the dust, see it split. That's them. I still can't see, Carter shouted, scanning helplessly. But she could. The rifle cracked again, then again. 3 flashes bloomed in the storm below, 3 confirmed hits. Silence fell across the ridge. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. Connelly lowered his useless scope, staring at her. His pride was gone, replaced by something quieter, something close to awe. She began clearing her rifle, her movements slow, methodical, almost tender. The others said nothing. The truth was too heavy for words. When the storm finally broke, the desert reappeared in fragments, first the ridge, then the wash, then the command vehicle below, marked with yellow flags. They had done it, or rather she had. Within the hour the Humvees arrived, white flags marking the exercise controllers. Captain Rostova climbed out first, her uniform streaked with sand, eyes scanning the field. When she saw her team alive and the targets down, her relief turned to disbelief. Report, she demanded. Connelly stood, his voice hoarse. Objectives neutralized, ma'am, all 3. How? He didn't answer, he just looked toward Anna. She was still kneeling at the edge of the ridge, gently brushing sand off her rifle, the old wood glowing softly in the weak light. That's when another figure emerged from the Humvee, a master gunnery sergeant with a weathered face like sun-scorched stone. His eyes landed on the rifle, and he stopped in his tracks. I'll be damned, he said quietly. Still haven't retired that old girl, have you, Weaver? The name hung in the air. Connelly blinked. Weaver. The master gun smiled. She wrote half the wind tables you boys use today. You're looking at one of the finest shots ever to walk out of Quantico. No one spoke. The revelation spread through the platoon like fire through dry grass. Anna Sharma, quiet, unassuming, mocked for her cheap weapon, was a legend they'd all grown up hearing about. The storm was over, the desert was still. And for the first time, every man on that ridge understood the cost of arrogance and the power of quiet mastery. Why was the base suddenly so quiet when she walked by? The storm had passed, but its memory lingered, fine dust settling over the compound, dulling the colors of everything it touched. Trucks rumbled past, Marines shouted across the yard, but around Gunnery Sergeant Anna Sharma there was a strange hush, the kind of silence that followed something unexplainable. She moved through it without expression, the old canvas rifle case in her hand, her steps measured and unhurried. The platoon watched her from the shade of the barracks. No laughter now, no muttered jokes about antiques, just eyes that followed her quietly, unsure how to bridge the distance between mockery and respect. Connelly stood among them, his face unreadable. The dust had turned his tan uniform gray, and something in his posture had changed. Less swagger, more weight. Captain Rostova watched from across the compound, arms folded, a furrow cutting between her brows. She was a woman who prided herself on control, on reading people, on never being caught off guard. But Anna Sharma had unraveled something in her, an uncomfortable truth that leadership wasn't always loud. That evening, as the sun bled orange across the desert, Rostova stepped into the debrief room. The air smelled of sweat, dust, and gun oil. Her platoon was seated in rows, exhausted but alert. Outstanding performance, she began, her tone clipped. The exercise was designed to push you to the edge of failure. You didn't break. That matters. A few nods, no smiles. Her eyes found Sharma standing quietly in the back, arms folded, her expression unreadable. However, Rostova continued, some lessons don't show up in your after-action reports. Some are harder to measure. You all pride yourselves on precision, but precision isn't in your weapon, it's in your perception. And perception, she paused, is something most of you didn't have until she showed you. The room stayed silent. Connelly shifted, glancing briefly toward Anna. Rostova's voice softened. When I first saw Gunnery Sergeant Sharma's rifle, I made a judgment. I mistook quiet mastery for irrelevance. I let ego cloud my understanding of skill. She inhaled. That won't happen again. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was something heavier, the kind of admission that changes how a leader carries themselves. Later that night, the base was a low hum of generators and distant voices. The barracks lights burned dim, yellow halos in the desert dark. Inside, the snipers sat on their bunks, rifles disassembled before them, cleaning kits spread out. But they weren't talking. There was no boasting about range scores, no stories of near misses. Just the rhythmic sound of steel rods through barrels, brushes twisting, patches sliding. The prideful energy that once filled the room had been replaced by something else, reverence. Anna sat at the far end of the barracks, her rifle stripped down on a white towel. The bolt in her hand gleamed faintly under the lamp. Her movements were methodical, almost ritualistic. Connelly appeared in the doorway, hesitating like a man approaching sacred ground. His voice was quiet. Gunny. She didn't look up. Sergeant. He shifted his weight, hands buried in his pockets. That shot you took, in the storm. I checked the report. Wind at target was gusting 45 miles an hour. Controllers logged it as the most difficult hit ever recorded at this range. She kept cleaning, her tone even. Wind's only a problem if you don't listen to it. He nodded, unsure what that meant. After a moment he said softly, I was wrong about you. Anna paused, not for long but enough. We all start wrong about someone, Sergeant. What matters is what we do after. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy with humility. Connelly stepped closer. Can I ask you something? She nodded slightly. That hold you made for the wind. It was more than my data recommended. How did you know? She looked at him then, her eyes calm but not cold. Your device reads the wind where you're standing. It can't see what's happening in the valley between you and the target. That's where the bullet spends most of its life. If you only trust what's near, you'll never understand what's ahead. He let the words sink in. They weren't just about shooting. Anna reassembled her rifle, locking the bolt into place with a soft metallic click. Connelly watched her, then without a word walked over to her gear, picked up a patch rod and began helping. He didn't ask, he just did it. Soon 2 more Marines joined in, Carter among them. They cleaned in silence, passing brushes, wiping steel, not out of obligation, but out of quiet respect. Sharma let them. When they finished, she gave a small nod. It wasn't approval, it was acceptance. Outside, the night was still. The desert wind had died down, leaving only the faint hum of the horizon. Hours later, the armory was empty except for her. The lights were low, humming softly. Rows of rifles lined the walls, sleek, sterile instruments of modern war. But at the center workbench, beneath the glow of a single bulb, sat her M40A1. She ran a soft cloth over the walnut stock, tracing the scars and scratches with her fingertips. Each mark had a memory, each dent a story. She could recall every one of them, some victories, some losses, some things she wished she'd never had to remember. The door creaked open. Gunny. It was Carter, young, hesitant. He lingered at the threshold like a boy stepping into a church. She didn't turn. What is it, Corporal? He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The smell of gun oil and dust hung thick in the air. I just wanted to say, he stopped, unsure. I'm sorry for what we said, for laughing we didn't know. She looked at him finally, the light catching the faint lines around her eyes. You don't need to be sorry for not knowing, Carter. You just need to learn from it. He nodded, staring at the old rifle. You've had that thing for a long time, huh? A lifetime. He leaned closer, squinting at the stock. What are those little marks? By the grip. Anna paused. Her thumb brushed over a set of shallow carvings, tiny, uneven etchings in the dark wood. They weren't kill tallies, too few, too deliberate. For a moment she didn't answer. The air hummed with the weight of memory. This one, she said softly, tracing a deeper gouge set apart from the rest. Afghanistan, a village called Sangar. A child was taken by insurgents, 7 years old. They used her as a shield on a balcony. We had a window of a few seconds. My spotter couldn't range it. The wind was bad, long shot over 1,000 yards. She stopped. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were somewhere else. Everyone said to wait, to call in an airstrike, but the blast would have killed her, so I took the shot. Carter didn't move. Anna's gaze softened, her tone barely a whisper. It was a perfect hit, but she screamed, not from the bullet, from the sound, a supersonic crack passing inches from her head. She closed her eyes briefly. I can still hear it. The silence in the armory stretched, thick and raw. That mark isn't for the man I shot, she said, her fingers resting on the carving. It's for her, to remind me that even the perfect shot has a cost, and that we carry it whether anyone sees it or not. Carter swallowed hard, the lump in his throat painful. He had fired hundreds of rounds in his short career, each one a symbol of pride. But in that moment, he understood something that training never taught him, the moral weight that came with every squeeze of the trigger. Anna reassembled her rifle, the metallic click slow and final. Then she looked at him, eyes gentle. Go get some sleep, Marine. Yes, ma'am. He turned to leave but paused at the door. Gunny. She glanced up. Do you ever stop hearing it? She was quiet for a long time. Then, no, you just learn to live beside the sound. When he left, the armory felt even quieter. Anna buckled the straps of her rifle case and stood. She walked out into the desert night, the sky a black ocean lit with cold stars. The air was still, almost holy. She climbed the low ridge behind the base and sat down, her back against a rock, her rifle beside her. The horizon stretched endlessly. The desert she had once conquered now seemed like an old friend, harsh, honest, unforgiving. Somewhere behind her, the barracks lights flickered and went dark. The men were asleep, dreaming of targets and wind calls and clean shots. But she sat awake, eyes fixed on the horizon, as if keeping watch over something none of them could see. The dawn came slow and quiet, painting the sky with bruised purple and pale gold. The light touched her face, then the rifle beside her. She smiled faintly, tired but at peace. In the end, no ceremony would mark what she had done, no medal, no speech. But in the silence of that morning, her lesson had already taken root in the hearts of those young Marines, etched deeper than any commendation. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Why did the platoon's mornings suddenly sound different? The desert hadn't changed. It was still a place of extremes, blistering days, frozen nights, silence that pressed down like judgment. But something subtle had shifted in the rhythm of 29 Palms. The laughter that used to echo from the range before dawn was gone. The bravado, the easy arrogance gone too. Now when the sun crept over the horizon, the sound that replaced it was quiet discipline. Boots on gravel, rifle bolts locking into place, the whisper of breath through cloth. And somewhere in the middle of it all, the steady voice of Gunnery Sergeant Anna Sharma. Captain Rostova stood on the observation deck, arms folded, watching her platoon move through a training exercise unlike any they'd ever run. No GPS, no kestrels, no ballistics apps, just compasses, notebooks, and the sharp edge of humility. Connelly was prone on the firing line, face pressed against the stock of his rifle. Sweat ran down his temple. His spotter whispered wind calls he no longer trusted completely. Beside him, Sharma crouched low, observing silently. "Read the dust," she said softly. Connelly frowned. "Gunny, I can't even see a mirage. The air's dead." "Then you're looking too hard," she replied. "You're waiting for the world to announce itself. It won't. You have to listen." He exhaled, lowered his cheek against the stock again. He tried not to look for movement, just to sense it. The air. The faint shift in the direction the sagebrush leaned. The lightest drift of grit over his glove. Sharma knelt beside him. "There, feel that." He adjusted a click right, fired. A faint ping answered back from 800 yards. His spotter blinked. Direct hit. Connelly looked at her. "How did you?" Sharma didn't answer. She just gave a faint nod and moved to the next shooter. Rostova exhaled slowly, half in awe. A week ago, her men had been the best shooters in the battalion, or so she'd believed. Now, under Sharma's quiet instruction, she realized they'd only ever known half the trade. At first, the resistance had been silent but real. Marines used to gadgets and instant data didn't like being stripped down to instinct. But Anna never argued, never forced. She just watched them fail until they were ready to learn. And when they did, she taught with patience that bordered on grace. One morning she gathered them on the edge of the range, the horizon still dark. The wind was light, the world muted and cool. "You all chase numbers," she said. "Wind readings, temperature, ballistic coefficients, but your enemy doesn't care about any of that. The battlefield isn't perfect. It lies to you. It confuses you. And if you depend on your tools more than your senses, you'll fail when it matters most." She lifted a handful of sand, letting it pour from her fingers. The grains caught the light. "This," she said, "is truth. It's never still, never predictable. You can't control it. You can only learn to understand it." The men listened. None of them dared interrupt. She looked over them, faces young, tired, and attentive. "You think shooting is about accuracy," she continued. "It's not. It's about patience, judgment. It's knowing when not to shoot." Connelly watched her, arms crossed. "You make it sound like religion." Her gaze flicked to him. "It is, Sergeant, the kind that demands faith when your eyes can't see." He didn't argue. He couldn't. Not after the storm. That day she broke them into pairs. Each shooter had one task: hit a steel plate at 600 yards using only visual cues. No wind meters, no data sheets. Only observation. Most missed, some badly. But with each shot, she would kneel beside them, calm and precise, asking the same question. "What did the earth tell you before you pulled the trigger?" And little by little, they began to answer differently. Carter, the youngest, was the first to surprise her. "The dust lifted just before the shot," he said after a miss. "I think I rushed it." Sharma nodded. "Good, you're starting to see." By the end of the week, the platoon's shots were landing closer, their voices quieter, the joking gone, replaced by focus. Even Rostova noticed the change in herself. She found excuses to walk the range more often, to stand nearby while Sharma instructed. Sometimes she'd pretend to check logistics or timing, but really she was listening, learning. Late one afternoon, as the sun bled orange into the desert, she approached while Sharma was cleaning her rifle at the edge of the firing line. "You're rebuilding my platoon," Rostova said quietly. Sharma didn't look up. "They're rebuilding themselves, ma'am. I just point the way." Rostova hesitated. "You could have humiliated me in front of them. You didn't." Anna glanced up then. Her eyes were tired but kind. "Respect isn't taken, it's returned." The captain nodded, then after a long pause said, "You know, I used to think strength was noise, command presence, shouting orders. But watching you, it's something else entirely." Sharma smiled faintly. "Strength is quiet, ma'am, the kind that doesn't need to prove it exists." Rostova watched her for a long time. then turned away, hiding the smallest smile of humility. Days turned into weeks. The training evolved. They practiced in night conditions, in wind, in silence so deep they could hear their own pulse. Sharma made them lie prone for hours, waiting for a single clean opportunity. She taught them restraint, the virtue no manual ever mentioned. When they grew restless, she'd tell them something that seemed like a riddle. "The bullet isn't your weapon," she'd say. "Your patience is." And somehow it stuck. Connelly was changing too. His swagger had melted into something steadier, quieter. He still had confidence, but it came from discipline now, not ego. One evening after training, he approached Sharma as she sat cleaning her rifle on the armory steps. The sky above was streaked in violet and fading light. "Gunny," he said, sitting beside her, "when you shoot, what do you think about?" She smiled faintly. "Nothing." "Nothing." "Thinking's loud. You can't hear the wind over it." He laughed under his breath, shaking his head. "That's poetic, Gunny." She shrugged. "It's survival." He studied her face. The lines of age weren't hard, they were earned. "How long have you been doing this?" "Too long," she said softly. "Long enough to know that every perfect shot comes with a cost." He nodded, remembering her story in the armory, the child, the scream. It haunted him too now, though he hadn't been there. It haunted him because he finally understood. That night after lights out, the platoon gathered around a single lantern outside the barracks. The desert air was cool, stars sharp above them. Carter passed around a battered coffee pot. No one spoke much, not out of tension, but peace. Connelly looked across the group. "You know," he said, "I used to think the gunny was old-fashioned, that she just couldn't keep up." Carter smirked faintly. "Yeah, we were idiots." Connelly shook his head. "No, we were blind, there's a difference." From the far end of the group, Sharma's quiet voice carried through the dark. "Blindness isn't shameful, Sergeant. Refusing to open your eyes is." They looked toward her. She was sitting a few feet away, polishing her scope under the faint light. Carter asked softly, "Gunny, why do you still use that old rifle? With your reputation, you could have anything." She looked up at the stars. "Because it reminds me I'm still learning. Every new rifle promises perfection. This one reminds me perfection doesn't exist." The group fell silent again. The wind brushed across the sand, whispering through the sage. Captain Rostova watched from the barracks doorway, unseen, her hands clasped behind her back. The sight before her, her once-proud, restless platoon now sitting quietly under the stars, hanging on the words of a woman they'd mocked, humbled her more deeply than any commendation ever had. The next morning, Sharma woke before dawn and walked to the far ridge alone. She carried her rifle, not because she needed it, but because it was part of her. The air was cold, thin. The world felt still. She lay prone, sighting down the scope at nothing in particular. She didn't fire, she just breathed. The desert breathed back. Behind her, she heard footsteps. It was Captain Rostova. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "Didn't try," Sharma replied. The captain crouched beside her. "They respect you, you know, more than they've ever respected me." Sharma smiled faintly. "Then I've done my job. Respect for me means they'll respect what I teach, respect what they carry." Rostova hesitated. "And what do you carry, Gunny?" Anna's gaze stayed on the horizon. "Wait, same as everyone, just learn not to put it down." They sat there together for a long while, two soldiers bound by unspoken understanding. When the sun finally broke over the ridge, Rostova said quietly, "You could have left the Corps years ago. Why stay?" Anna watched the light spread across the desert floor. "Because somewhere out there," she said, "a young shooter is about to make their first mistake, and maybe I can teach them one less they'll have to regret." The captain looked at her then, really looked, and realized what kind of strength sat beside her. Not loud, not fiery, just steady, patient, unbreakable. The kind that changes people. The wind shifted, lifting the edge of Anna's scarf. The day was beginning again. The sound of rifles in the distance, disciplined, deliberate, focused, echoed across the valley. And somewhere deep within that sound was something new, not arrogance, not fear. Faith. Faith in patience, faith in silence, faith in what could be learned from a woman who never needed to raise her voice to be heard. Why did the world go so quiet before the first shot? The order had come down fast, a real mission, not a drill. The kind that tore men from their comfort and threw them into the heat of consequence. A smuggling route identified across the border, weapons caches hidden among civilian ruins. The terrain, brutal, shifting dunes and broken rock, looked too much like 29 Palms for comfort. Captain Rostova had barely finished briefing before she caught herself glancing toward the corner of the room. Sharma stood there, silent as always, her eyes tracking the map with that same steady calm. "Gunny," Rostova said, lowering her voice. "This is your call. You built them. You lead them." Anna shook her head. "No, ma'am, it's your platoon. They're ready. They just don't know it yet." That was how it always went with her. No grand speeches, no dramatic exits. Just quiet faith handed to others like a torch. By nightfall, the convoy rolled out. Humvees cut across the desert, red lights blinking in the distance, engines humming like heartbeats. Inside the lead vehicle, Connelly sat beside Carter, eyes on the map glowing faint green on the dashboard. "Feels strange," Carter said softly. "No Gunny this time." Connelly checked his rifle, his voice low. "She's here, just listen close enough." They reached their observation point before dawn, a rocky shelf overlooking the valley. Below, the world stretched wide and endless, a maze of wind-sculpted dunes and dry riverbeds. Rostova crouched behind them, scanning through binoculars. "Intel says the convoy comes through at 0300. 4 trucks, lightly armored. We identify, record, and if fired upon, engage." "Copy that," Connelly said. The air was dead still, the kind of stillness that felt heavy. The team settled into their hides, sand grinding softly under their elbows. For hours nothing, just the wind, just breathing. Then movement, faint headlights cresting the far ridge. Rostova signaled, "Visual." Through his scope, Connelly tracked the lead truck. Dust trailed behind it like a ghost. The rangefinder flickered to life. 1,200 yards, easy if the wind held. Except the wind never holds. A faint shift brushed his cheek, east to west, subtle but real. He froze. A week ago he would have trusted the Kestrel, but it was back at base, locked in a case. He remembered Anna's voice, "Don't look for the wind, feel it." He closed his eyes for a second, the taste of grit on his tongue, the sound of the sand brushing against his sleeve, the direction it hissed. He adjusted 2 clicks left. "Send it?" Carter asked. He nodded, "Send it." The rifle cracked. The sound rolled down the valley, swallowed by the dunes. "Impact front tire, perfect disable." Rostova's voice was low, controlled. "Good shot." But then chaos. The convoy stopped, doors flew open, figures spilled out, armed fast. "Multiple hostiles dismounting," Carter said. "Count 6, no 8. The team froze. The desert turned alive with movement. Rostova's hand went to her radio. "Hold fire unless engaged." The words hung in the air. Connelly sighted on a figure ducking behind the second truck. The target moved erratically, weapon glinting. He could take it clean, quick, but something stopped him. A flicker of memory. "Shooting isn't about accuracy," Anna's voice echoed in his mind. "It's about judgment. It's knowing when not to pull the trigger." He watched, breath held. Then a shape smaller than the rest stepped into view. A child, dust-covered, barefoot, running. She dove behind the same truck. His stomach dropped. "Captain," he whispered, "we've got civilians." "Confirm," Rostova ordered. "I confirm," he said, voice strained. "At least 1 child, maybe 2. Everything froze. The desert was still again, the kind of silence that screamed. Then a single shot cracked from below, echoing through the valley. A bullet snapped into the rock near Carter's head. "Contact, return fire," Rostova shouted. The platoon erupted controlled bursts, deliberate shots, but the chaos below was spreading. Smoke, dust, figures running in every direction. Through it all, Connelly stayed still. His crosshairs hovered over a moving shadow, adult male, AK visible, but the child was near him, too close. His breath hitched. The old reflex said shoot, the new one said wait. He waited. Seconds stretched. Then the man broke away from the child, sprinting toward the trucks. Connelly tracked him, led slightly, and fired. The figure dropped. Carter exhaled, hit clean. Rostova's voice came steady but low. "That's it. Fall back to exfil route. We've got what we need." They withdrew under covering fire, moving fast but measured. No panic, no wasted motion. When they reached the pickup zone, the adrenaline drained out of them like blood. The desert fell silent again, the eerie quiet after violence. Connelly sat in the dust beside the Humvee, his rifle across his knees. The sun was coming up, cold and merciless. He watched the light spread across the sand and realized he was trembling not from fear, but from restraint. For the first time in his life, he'd chosen not to take a shot. And that choice had probably saved a life. Later back at base, the platoon moved slower than usual. No bragging, no celebration. They unpacked, cleaned weapons, filed reports. The silence was heavy but not guilty. It was reflective. In the corner of the command tent, Captain Rostova leaned over the table, scanning drone footage from the mission. Connelly stood beside her. "There," she said, pointing. "You held fire, you saw the civilians." "Yes, ma'am." Her voice softened. "You made the right call." He nodded, hesitant. "I only saw her because I hesitated. The old me wouldn't have." Rostova looked at him. "Then the old you's gone." He smiled faintly. "Gunny'd say I finally started to see." She would. Outside, the evening light stretched across the desert, painting everything in bronze. The wind picked up, slow, whispering, familiar. Anna Sharma sat on a low wall near the armory, watching the sunset. Her rifle was beside her, disassembled, the stock resting across her knees. She wasn't smiling, but her eyes carried peace, the kind that comes when the world begins to make sense again. Connelly approached quietly, a cup of coffee in his hand. "You were right," he said, handing it to her. She took it, nodding once. "About what?" "The wind, the silence, the patience." He sat beside her. "There was a girl down there. I didn't take the shot." Anna's gaze stayed on the horizon. "Good." He looked at her. "I could have, clean angle, but—" He hesitated. "I thought of what you said about the sound, about what it costs." She finally looked at him. "That's when you know you're a real shooter, when the silence before the shot weighs more than the sound after it." He exhaled, nodding slowly. "You ever regret it, Gunny, the things you've seen?" "Regret?" She took a long sip of coffee. "No, but I remember every day." He nodded, understanding in silence. For a while they just sat there, watching the last light fade. The desert went purple, then black, the stars blooming like scattered embers. After a long while, Anna spoke again. "You did well out there, Sergeant. You led, you thought, you saw. That's the only thing that matters." Connelly almost smiled. "Didn't do it alone." "No one ever does," she said softly. "We just tell ourselves we do." The night grew colder. The hum of generators carried faintly through the base. After a pause, he said quietly, "What'll you do when your time's up, Gunny? When the Corps finally lets you hang it up?" She looked at the stars, the reflection of them glinting in her eyes. "Maybe teach, somewhere quiet, show the next generation how to listen to the wind." He nodded. "You'd be good at that." She smiled faintly. "That's what scares me." They both laughed, quiet, genuine, the kind of laughter that breaks tension but leaves meaning behind. Behind them, the platoon lights flickered off one by one. The desert reclaimed its silence. Captain Rostova stood in her office, looking out through the small window at the pair sitting on the wall. She didn't interrupt, didn't call them in. She just watched, a soft expression settling on her face. Because she finally understood something she hadn't before. Leadership wasn't about command. It was about presence. Anna didn't lead through words. She led through stillness, the kind that demanded reflection instead of obedience, the kind that lingered long after she was gone. The next morning, when the platoon assembled on the range, the routine felt different again. The air was cooler, the lights softer. The men moved with a kind of reverence. Connelly lay prone, sighting down his rifle, Carter beside him. The wind shifted slightly, brushing across their faces. Carter smiled faintly. "You feel that?" Connelly nodded. "Yeah. Gunny'd say it's talking to us." Connelly adjusted a single click left, breathing slow. "Then let's listen." He fired. The sound rolled across the valley, clean and sure. The ping echoed back dead center. He smiled, not wide, not proud, just peaceful. Behind them, Anna stood watching, her face unreadable. But when the wind caught her scarf and lifted it just slightly, she let herself smile. The student had learned, the teacher could rest. The desert was quiet again, but this time the silence wasn't emptiness. It was understanding. Why did her hands tremble for the first time in years? It wasn't from fear, not the kind you could name anyway. It was something quieter, older, born from memory rather than danger. The mission was simple, at least on paper. Escort detail for an Allied humanitarian convoy moving through a disputed zone. Local militia skirmishes had made the route unpredictable. The Marines weren't there to fight, they were there to protect. Simple, Anna thought, but simple didn't mean easy. She sat in the rear of the Humvee, her rifle resting across her knees, watching the desert slide by. The convoy stretched ahead, supply trucks loaded with food and medicine, their sides painted with white UN emblems already dulled by dust. The heat shimmered, bending the horizon into waves. Captain Rostova sat in the front passenger seat, radio pressed to her ear. "All teams check in, keep intervals tight, eyes open." "Copy that," Connelly's voice crackled back. Anna said nothing. She was watching the children. They appeared suddenly along the roadside, thin figures waving at the convoy, barefoot in the dust. Some smiled, others didn't. One girl, maybe 8 years old, just stood still, watching as the trucks rolled by. Something in Anna's chest tightened. Her fingers brushed the small carving on her rifle stock, the one she never explained to anyone but Carter. The mark for the shot that had saved a life but left a sound that never faded. A gust of wind rolled through the canyon, carrying sand and the faint hum of engines. Rostova glanced over her shoulder. "You good, Gunny?" Anna nodded once. "Fine, ma'am." But she was. The road narrowed ahead, twisting between crumbling ridges. The convoy slowed, the radio hissed. "Eagle 1 to all units, possible obstruction ahead. Stay sharp." The lead truck came to a stop. Dust swirled. Through her scope, Anna scanned the road, a pile of rocks stacked across the path. Too neat, too deliberate. "Improvised roadblocks," she said. "Could be nothing, could be bait." Rostova grabbed the mic. "Alpha team, dismount and clear, eyes up." 2 Marines approached cautiously, rifles raised. The silence of the canyon was deafening. No birds, no wind, just the faint hum of idling engines. Then a sound. A metallic clink, faint but unmistakable. "Contact." The explosion tore through the air, not massive, but close enough to throw dust and heat across the convoy. The lead truck lurched sideways, tires shredded, metal twisted. Shouts echoed across the column. "IED, casualty front." Rostova barked orders. "Set perimeter, secure the civilians." Anna was already out of the Humvee, moving low, eyes scanning the ridges. The air shimmered with heat and smoke. She dropped prone behind a boulder, sighting down her scope. Movement, a flash of fabric on the ridgeline, a man slipping behind a rock, rifle in hand. Another appeared beside him. "Two shooters north ridge, 400 meters," she called. Connelly's voice came back over the comms. "I've got the left one." Anna steadied her breathing. Her pulse slowed. The old rhythm returned, sight, breath, pressure. She fired. The rifle cracked once clean. The shooter dropped. The second tried to run. Connelly's shot found him mid-stride. "Clear," he said. The echoes faded. The smell of cordite and burnt sand hung heavy in the air. Medics rushed forward, pulling two wounded aid workers from the lead truck. One Marine was down, shrapnel through the leg, screaming but alive. Rostova moved between the trucks, issuing calm, efficient orders. But Anna stayed where she was, scope scanning the hills. Her finger hovered above the trigger, ready but steady. She waited. And that's when she saw her. A girl, maybe 10 years old, standing at the far edge of the ridge, half hidden behind a rock. Her dress fluttered in the wind. She wasn't holding a weapon. She wasn't moving, just watching. The breath caught in Anna's throat. For a second, the desert fell away. The memory came back in full. Afghanistan, a balcony, a scream that cut through the sound of victory. Her hand trembled. "Gunny," Connelly's voice buzzed in her ear. "You got something." She didn't answer. "Gunny." "Negative," she said finally, "just local." The girl disappeared behind the rocks, gone as quietly as she'd appeared. Anna exhaled, lowering her rifle. Her chest felt heavy. Rostova's voice came over the comms. "All units mount up, we're moving." The convoy rolled again, slower this time. The wounded stabilized. The sun dipped lower, painting the canyon in deep gold. Anna rode in silence. The hum of the engine filled the space where her thoughts should have been. When they reached the safe zone hours later, dusk was settling. The trucks parked in a rough circle, headlights cutting through the dark. Marines set up perimeter lights while medics worked under tarps. Anna found a spot on a low ridge overlooking the camp and sat down. Her rifle rested beside her, her gaze on the horizon. The air was cool now. The stars were starting to appear. Connelly climbed up after her, carrying 2 tin mugs of coffee. He handed her one, then sat beside her. "Hell of a day," he said quietly. She nodded, eyes still distant. Every day's hell in the right light. He studied her face. The lines looked deeper tonight, the calm more fragile. "You saw something, didn't you?" he asked. "Up there on the ridge." Her lips tightened. "A girl." He waited. "Reminded me of someone," she said softly. "Someone I almost didn't save." Connelly took a slow breath. "The one you told Carter about." Anna nodded. "You don't forget the sound, you just learn to live beside it." The wind brushed over them, carrying the smell of smoke and diesel. Connelly looked out across the camp. "You think that's the cost, that we're meant to carry the noise forever?" She was quiet for a long time. Then, "No, the cost is pretending it doesn't exist." He nodded slowly, the truth settling in. They sat in silence for a while, watching the lights flicker below. Somewhere someone laughed, a thin, fragile sound in the vastness of the desert. "Gunny," Connelly said finally, "how do you know when it's time to stop?" "Stop what?" "Everything, the job, the weight." She smiled faintly. "When it stops teaching you." He thought about that for a long time. Later that night, Rostova found her by the ridge. "Gunny," she said softly, "you did good out there, saved lives." Anna didn't answer. She just watched the horizon. Rostova hesitated. "But I saw your hands, you were shaking." Anna turned to her slowly, eyes steady but full of something human. "Even stone cracks, ma'am. It just takes longer." The captain didn't know what to say, so she didn't. She just nodded, and for once that was enough. When the night settled and the camp went quiet, Anna lay awake under the stars, her rifle beside her. The desert wind whispered over her face, gentle now, almost kind. She thought of the girl on the ridge, of the one from years ago, of every shot that had landed true and every one that had echoed too long. Sleep didn't come easy, it never did, but peace, a kind of fragile momentary peace, brushed against her like a breath. The next morning before sunrise, Carter found her still awake. She sat on the same ridge, the world washed in pale blue light. He hesitated, then said softly, "Gunny, I heard what happened yesterday. You okay?" She smiled without turning. "You're supposed to stop asking your seniors that, Corporal." "Yeah," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Still gonna ask." Her smile lingered. "I'm fine, just thinking." "About what?" She looked out at the horizon, where the first sliver of sunlight broke the edge of the world. "About how we spend our lives teaching others to see, and sometimes forget to look ourselves." Carter sat beside her. "You saw something, didn't you?" "Someone," she said. "Maybe just a ghost, maybe a reminder." The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was full, like the quiet between waves. Finally she stood, brushing sand from her uniform. "Pack up, Corporal. We've got another long day." As she walked down the ridge, the light caught the edge of her rifle's wooden stock. The carvings gleamed faintly in the dawn, scars turned to symbols. And as the convoy came alive again, engines rumbling, men shouting, and sunlight spilling across the desert floor, she felt something shift inside her. The tremor in her hands was gone. The past wasn't lighter, but it was finally steady. Why did the air on base feel different when she returned? It wasn't louder, not busier, just different, like a place that had learned to breathe again after holding its breath for too long. Months had passed since the convoy ambush. The mission had gone down in reports as a tactical success, but inside the ranks it lived as something quieter, a story whispered in the barracks, carried between new recruits like gospel. The gunny saw the wind. She hit through a sandstorm. She waited and saved a child. Stories always grew in retelling, but even when the details blurred, the reverence stayed the same. Captain Rostova stepped out of her office that morning and watched the range come alive in the pale light. Marines lined up on the firing line, steady, patient, silent. Not one joke, not one shout, just breath and focus. And at the far end, walking between them, her presence calm and sure, was Gunnery Sergeant Anna Sharma. Her hair was grayer now, the lines on her face deeper, but her stride carried the same quiet command, the kind that didn't need rank to be obeyed. She moved from shooter to shooter, pausing beside each. She'd kneel, look through their scopes, ask softly, "What's your wind call?" Sometimes she'd nod. Sometimes she'd just say, "Too sure, doubt keeps you honest." The recruits both feared and adored her. Some whispered that she could read the wind before it moved. Others said she could tell if a round would miss before the trigger broke. Rostova smiled faintly at the thought. Legends are just truths we're not ready to explain. That afternoon, as the range emptied and the sun sank low, Anna sat on the old concrete steps of the tower, wiping her rifle clean. Connelly joined her, dropping down with a grunt. "Another batch of kids who think precision is about tech," he said, chuckling softly. Anna smirked. "They'll learn. They always do, right before they bleed their pride out on the dirt." He nodded, stretching his sore shoulders. "You ever get tired of proving the same lesson, Gunny?" She thought about it, her hands still working the rag across the rifle's stock. "No, because every time someone learns it, the world gets a little quieter." He smiled faintly. "You make it sound like peace is a sound." "It is," she said softly. "It's just hard to hear." A faint breeze passed over the range, stirring dust around their boots. They both looked toward the horizon, a stretch of gold fading into violet. After a long pause, Connelly said, "They're saying you're up for retirement." Anna's hand paused mid-motion. "They've been saying that for years." "Yeah," he said, watching her, "but this time they mean it." She didn't answer, just went back to cleaning, the steady rhythm of cloth against wood. He hesitated. What will you do when you go? Anna didn't look up. Same thing I do here. Listen, teach. Maybe somewhere the wind sounds different. He smiled faintly. They'll miss you. She finally looked at him, eyes steady. They'll be fine. If I've done my job, they won't need me. He nodded, though his throat tightened. He wanted to tell her they'd never stop needing her, but he knew she'd just smile that quiet smile and say that's the point. Later that week, Captain Rostova called her into her office. The walls were bare except for one frame, a faded photograph of a marine company standing under the blazing Afghan sun. Rostova motioned for her to sit. They're reassigning me, the captain said. Joint Operations Command back east. Anna nodded. Good for you, ma'am. It's different without you here, Rostova admitted. You changed this place. Anna smiled softly. I didn't change anything. I just showed them what was already there. The captain studied her. You ever wonder if you stayed too long? Anna met her gaze. Every day, but the day I stop wondering, I'll know it's time to go. Rostova leaned back, exhaling. When that day comes, promise me you'll tell me where you're headed. Anna smirked faintly. You'll know, the wind will shift. The captain laughed quietly, always with the riddles. Truth sounds like riddles to people in a hurry, Anna said. When she left the office, the base was alive with the hum of twilight. Recruits jogging in cadence, trucks rumbling, someone's laughter echoing from the mess tent. It was a world she'd lived in for decades, and for the first time she realized how much she'd come to love its rhythm. That night she walked the perimeter alone, the stars sharp and cold overhead. Every few steps she passed a young sentry, each one snapping to attention. Some looked nervous, others proud. She'd nod to each, her voice quiet, carry on. To one young Marine she paused. His rifle sling was twisted, his stance uneven. New, she asked. Yes, gunny, he said, voice tight. She adjusted the sling, straightened his shoulder. You'll get used to it. The trick, not holding the rifle, it's letting it rest where it belongs. He nodded. Where's that, ma'am? She smiled faintly, close to the heart but not heavy on it. He didn't understand, not yet, but he would. They always did. The following morning, the wind picked up early, a dry, restless wind that swept across the range and carried sand in low whirls. The recruits struggled against it, cursing as they adjusted their sights. Anna stood behind them, her scarf whipping against her shoulder, her voice calm but sharp. Don't fight it, learn it. The wind doesn't care about you. Respect it anyway. One recruit, a girl no older than 20, looked up, frustration on her face. Gunny, how do you see something you can't see? Anna crouched beside her, picked up a handful of dust and let it pour from her palm. You don't see it, she said. You feel what it leaves behind. The girl blinked, then nodded slowly. Hours later, when the final shot rang out and hit center steel, the recruits erupted into cheers. Anna only smiled, small, proud, but distant. That evening in the armory, Connelly found her packing her rifle into its case. The old, scarred M40A1, the same one they once laughed at. Going somewhere, he asked. She didn't look up. Somewhere quieter. He swallowed. You're really leaving, huh? She nodded. The Corps gave me everything it could. The rest I've got to find myself. He tried to speak, but the words stuck. She spared him the struggle. You'll do fine, she said softly. Keep them honest. Make sure they listen before they shoot. He nodded, eyes wet. Yes, Gunny. She paused, looking at him one last time. And Connelly. Yes, ma'am. Don't call it my rifle anymore. It's yours now. He stared at the weapon, stunned. I can't. You already have, she said. You earned it. When she walked away, the sound of her boots faded into the low hum of the armory lights. Outside, the night wind rose soft, steady like breath. The next morning, Captain Rostova stood by the gate, watching as Anna loaded her duffel into the back of a transport truck. No ceremony, no farewell formation, just quiet respect. "Where will you go?" Rostova asked. Anna smiled faintly. "North. There's a range out in Wyoming, long grass, thin air. They say the wind sings there." The captain nodded. "If it does, I hope it sings about you." Anna chuckled softly. "It already does, just no one's listening." She extended her hand. Rostova took it, firm, unspoken words passing between them. As the truck pulled away, dust rising in the wake, the platoon gathered silently by the fence line. No salutes, no shouts, just eyes following until the vehicle became a shimmer on the horizon. Carter spoke quietly. "Feels like the wind just left with her." Connelly shook his head. "No, she's just somewhere teaching it to talk." Rostova smiled faintly at that, a rare proud smile. And when the breeze rolled across the base moments later, gentle and warm, every Marine turned their face into it, listening. Because somehow, in the silence, it felt like she was still there, her voice in the wind, her lessons in their breath. That night in a small cabin miles away, Anna unpacked her rifle, now cleaned, oiled whole. She set it on a table by the window. Outside, the Wyoming plains stretched endless under a deep blue sky. The wind whispered through the grass, soft and alive. She closed her eyes and smiled. For the first time in years, the silence didn't hurt. It healed. Why did the wind sound familiar that morning on the range? It had been years since Gunnery Sergeant Anna Sharma's truck rolled down that dusty road and vanished beyond the horizon. The base had changed since then, new walls, new recruits, new technology. But some things hadn't. The wind still moved the same way across the dunes. The dawn still painted the desert in pale gold, and the silence before the first shot still felt sacred. Connelly stood on the firing line, his face older now, his posture calm. His hair had thinned, his voice had deepened, but when he lifted the rifle to his shoulder, it was steady, the kind of steady you only earn through time and failure. He looked down the scope, the world narrowing into focus. The wind was pushing left, faint but inconsistent. The young spotter beside him called it at 5 miles per hour. Connelly smiled faintly. "It's more like 4, maybe less." The recruit frowned. "Sir, the Kestrel says." He cut her off gently. "The wind doesn't care what your Kestrel says, feel it." The girl hesitated, unsure what that meant. He nodded toward the ridge. "Watch the grass, the shimmer of heat above the sand, the dust. They'll tell you more truth than numbers ever will." She tried, adjusted one click, fired. The ping came back clear, center plate. Her eyes widened. "How did you?" "Don't thank me," Connelly said softly. "Thank the wind." Behind them, the rest of the platoon worked through the morning drills. Not one shouted, not one boasted. They worked in near silence, breathing, adjusting, listening. And up on the small range tower, Captain Carter, no longer the shy corporal, no longer the kid who once laughed at an old rifle, watched with quiet pride. He kept that rifle locked in a glass case in his office now, the old walnut M40A1, the wood scarred, the markings faint. Beneath it, a small brass plate read, "She listened, so we learned." No rank, no name, no story, just that. Because that was all that needed to be said. After the recruits cycled through, Carter made his way down to the firing line, dust kicking up under his boots. Connelly was still there, watching the new shooters with the same patient silence Anna once had. Carter smiled. "You've become her, you know." Connelly chuckled, shaking his head. "No one becomes her, we just borrow her patience for a while." Carter's eyes softened. "She'd like that." "Yeah," Connelly said quietly, "she would." They stood there a while, watching the young Marines work the wind. Their mistakes were small now, their corrections smaller. Every time a shot landed, they smiled faintly and went right back to work. No cheering, just quiet acknowledgement. That's how she'd wanted it. Later that day, the wind picked up. Dust swirled across the range, visibility dropping. Most instructors would have called it, but Connelly didn't. "Keep shooting," he said. "Learn what the storm teaches." The recruits hesitated, squinting through the grit. One of them, the young woman from earlier, raised her hand. "Sir, we can't see the targets." Connelly knelt beside her, lowering his voice. "You don't need to. Sometimes it's not about the target, it's about trusting your breath." She frowned, confused, but fired anyway. The ping came half a second later. Her mouth fell open. Connelly smiled. "See, the wind's still talking, you just needed to stop shouting over it." Up in the tower, Carter watched and couldn't help but think she'd be proud. That night, as the base lights flickered off one by one, Connelly sat alone in the armory. The air smelled of gun oil and dust, just like it used to. The old rifle case gleamed softly in the dim light. He reached out, tracing the carved stock through the glass. His reflection stared back, older, slower but content. "Hey, Gunny," he said quietly. "You were right, they listen now." The wind outside shifted, rattling the thin windows. He smiled. "Yeah, I know, you told me not to talk to ghosts." But the wind blew again, a single soft gust that seemed to move through the room like breath. The papers on the table fluttered. The silence deepened. And somehow he felt her there. Not as a voice, not as a memory, just a presence calm, steady, infinite. The next morning, Carter and Connelly stood together as the recruits assembled. A graduation ceremony, quiet, informal, nothing fancy. Just Marines standing shoulder to shoulder under the rising sun. Carter spoke briefly. "You came here to learn how to shoot. What you've learned is how to see. That's what she gave us, that's what you'll carry." He nodded toward the horizon. "The wind's always talking, just listen." Afterward, the platoon dispersed, but the recruits lingered, packing slowly, glancing toward the case inside the armory as if it were some kind of shrine. One of them, the same young woman from before, asked softly, "Sir, what was her name?" Connelly paused. "Does it matter?" She frowned slightly. I just want to remember her right." He smiled faintly. "Then remember this. She was the kind of Marine who didn't need you to remember her, just to keep doing it right." The recruit nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." When she turned away, Carter looked at him. "You really think that's what she wanted?" Connelly exhaled. "Yeah, because in her world, remembering wasn't about talking, it was about doing." He looked toward the horizon, where the wind danced over the sand in long, graceful waves. "And as long as there's one shooter out there listening before they fire, she's not gone." Years passed, bases changed, people moved on, but the philosophy stayed. Somewhere in a training manual buried deep in an appendix, a short paragraph appeared one day, anonymous, unattributed. "Trust the wind more than your fear. Feel before you calculate. And never forget, silence is not absence. It's the space where truth speaks." No one knew who wrote it, but every Marine who read it felt like they already did. And far from the base, in a small cabin tucked into the Wyoming hills, a woman in her 60s sat on her porch with a mug of coffee and a rifle across her knees. The wind moved through the tall grass in slow, whispering waves. She watched it the way most people watch the ocean, with quiet reverence. Anna Sharma smiled. Her hair was white now, her eyes lined, but her hands were steady. The same wind she once fought against now sang to her, low and kind. She'd been teaching again, local hunters, young veterans, even kids from town who wanted to learn the old way. They called her Miss Anna. None of them knew her rank. Few knew her history. She liked it that way. Sometimes when one of her students would ask, "How do you know where to aim before you shoot?" she'd just smile and say, "I don't. I just listen long enough for the answer." They'd laugh, not realizing how literal she meant it. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the plains, she heard a truck pulling up the dirt road. A man stepped out, older, broad-shouldered, walking with a limp. "Connelly." She laughed softly. "You look terrible, Sergeant." He grinned. "You look exactly the same, Gunny." They sat on the porch for a long while, saying little, just watching the wind roll across the fields. He finally spoke. "Brought you something." He handed her a small wooden box. Inside, wrapped in cloth, was the old brass plate from the armory display. She listened, so we learned. She looked at it for a long time. "Didn't need to bring this, Connelly." "Yeah," he said, smiling faintly, "but it belongs to you." She shook her head. "No, it belongs to everyone who finally shut up long enough to hear something worth listening to." They laughed quietly. The sound drifted out over the hills. As the light faded, they sat in silence, two soldiers who'd survived the noise, who'd learned that victory wasn't loud, and that the truest mark you could leave wasn't on a target. It was on the people who carried your lessons forward. When the stars finally came out, Connelly stood. "I should head back." Anna nodded. "You'll come again." He smiled, "Always." After he drove away, she sat a little longer, holding the brass plate in her hands. The wind brushed against her hair, gentle and cool. She closed her eyes, whispering softly to the air, "They learned, old friend. They really learned." The breeze stirred, as if in answer. And somewhere far away, on a Marine firing range at dawn, a young recruit steadied her breath, adjusted a single click for wind, and fired. Ping! Perfect! The echo rolled across the valley, merging with the wind, the same wind that carried Anna Sharma's story, long after names and ranks had faded. Because some legacies aren't carved in stone or recorded in books. They're carried in silence. They're felt, not seen. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.